So it's all time-aligned with time references to the points in your media where you make the annotations. You can have transcriptions, as in you're writing down directly what's being said in the recording. Translations, don't need to explain what that is. Glosses, you might need to know it's breaking up the words into morphemes. How many people are from a linguistics background? All of you? Okay, good. Descriptions of gesture or body language, things like that. Comments or descriptions about what's going on in the video or what you think might be happening in the language. It doesn't have to be direct, it can be whatever you say, really. Why do we do these? Like, why do you do it in Elan? So you do it because these annotations can then be used for other things. So they're exportable as text files or as subtitles. You can create language learning materials from them, and you can put them into Flex, which is something you'll be also learning about today, although that process is a bit complicated. And you can search within one file of your Elan. So if you want to know how many instances of a certain word there are in an hour-long kind of monologue, you can do that within Elan. And then you can also create a corpus and search for the instances of a word within multiple files in Elan files. That is a little bit kind of higher end stuff, and we won't go into that capability today, but there's heaps of resources out there about that, which you'll find on the Elan website. So quick little note about templates. Maybe this won't really, this might be a bit daunting now, but hopefully by the end of this 40 minutes, you'll feel a bit more comfortable with this. So Elan templates, which you would have had to download to start up your Elan project, in the video, in the information that I just gave you. A template is the hierarchical structure which organizes your Elan file. It's the kind of basis upon which your annotations are built. It consists of tiers, which are different layers. I'll show you those in a second, which are different types. So you can have, say, a text or a comment or a translation type. The tiers can be hierarchically dependent on another. So, for example, I've got a tier, which is a direct transcription of everything that's being said by a speaker, and I want to make comments just on that, what that speaker's saying. I can make that a dependent tier, so it's directly related to that. So when you export a time-aligned thing, all of the comments that are based on something someone said at 3 minutes into the recording, all of those will go and be aligned in there. The only way to understand templates is to fool around in Elan and experience them for yourself. It's quite difficult for me to explain it to you. So have a look today. Come and ask us questions this afternoon. There's the same link to the sample templates as we provided before. So, and there's some references which are also on the Elan website. So that's all I've got to say in a presentation kind of form. Now I will show you Elan itself. So when you open up Elan, it takes some time, apparently. It's just this big grey screen, okay, and that's absolutely normal, that's fine. Now, as I said before, it's a separate file from your media file. So when you go and open it up, when you're creating a new Elan file, you don't click on open. Oh. What happened? I pressed escape and...
Code escape. I unplugged it.
No, I didn't.
But it shouldn't.
At what point did it cut out?
When you said it's a grey screen.
When I pressed the escape.
Here it is.
Okay. Okay, I'm not pressing anything anymore except for the mouse and some other things. Okay, so here's your Elan screen. This is what you'll get when you start up. If you click on open and then go to open your video file that you want to write down the words on, that's not going to work because we're creating a separate file. So it depends. You've probably got a mixture. I've got a mixture of Macs and PCs in the screen. So this is a PC. It's got a different operating system to a Mac. It runs a little bit differently. What you see is a little different, but not very different. So if you've got a question about how it works, I've tried to point it out in the handout, but if there is a difference, come to us in the afternoon and we'll sort it out. Or just wave out at me now and I'll hopefully be able to catch it. So you go new. Now, did you put my folder on the desktop? Oh, that's all right. Will it? So first thing, click on the little folder instead of on the text, and it opens up the new folder. So when you've got a Mac, you will have another screen which clicks on Add Media, and then you choose the media. For this one, it comes up with New, and then you have to choose the file in here. So I've got my 2 different files here. It's really important that we have an audio file which is in a WAV form, which is separate from the video file. And the importance of this is because, as you'll see really soon, Elan has this great function where you can see the audio in a waveform, and that makes it really easy to identify when someone stops speaking and to kind of create segments that you can then annotate. So if you just have a video file and you open it up, then you'll play the video and you'll have the option to write down what's being said, but you don't have any kind of tool to assist you in working out when they're stopping and when they're going to pause and all that kind of thing. If you turn your video file into a WAV file, then or if you have recorded a WAV file separately, depending on your workflow, then you will be able to see where the WAV file goes and what is happening within the audio. So on the Rule website on your handout, there's a video on how to use an online converter to convert your video files into a WAV file. You can also use VLC for this. If you go to the Elan website, and I think it's in other third-party materials, or it could just be in the general kind of information about how to get your media into Elan, it's on page 7 or 4, I can't remember, but there is some information there about how to use VLC. It's really quite simple, but you have to have the PC version of VLC or a later version of the Mac version of VLC. Anyway, when you've got your WAV file, your audio file, and your video file, you need to then put them in, and you need to tell your Elan, to get the WAV file first so that it's directly referencing the audio and then making that WAV form. So you select WAV and then press on the arrow. For Macs, you double click on it and it just automatically goes in. And then the same with your video file there. And so that's the media done. We've got a video, we've got the audio, but now we need to tell Elan how to structure the comments that you're making about that. And that's where the templates come in. So there are some sample templates. There are some sample templates which I've already told you about like 3 times. And they live here. I'm going to use template 3 because that allows for 2 different speakers. So just click on these arrows again. With the Mac, it'll have add template in instead of add media. So you just click add template, pop that in. So you've got all of your files that your Elan file is going to reference here. And then you just press OK. And magically, you've got your Elan file. So I'll show you around this screen and I'll show you how to start using it. But first, what we have to do is save our file. Incredibly important. I will always save my file as the same file name as the multitasking. Okay, I'll save my file name with the same file name as my audio and video files. which is a Elan example. So we'll just save that there. And that saves it as a .eaf file. Now, this file can then be opened up from either in Elan or from a folder. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Here you've got a screen with a number of different things. This black fuzzy line in the middle here is the WAV form. So if you didn't import a WAV form in there, you wouldn't be able to see the audio. I don't think, unfortunately, we don't have audio capabilities, but if I play this, you can see the screen is going across, and if you could hear the sound, it would be coming out at the same time as those black blobs on the screen. That would be something we can do in 407 this afternoon. So this is a really good tool, and it's really important that we can take advantage of that. So the next thing I would do, on your sheet, I've already said it here, is to make sure that your file backs up automatically. So you've saved it, but you want to make sure it backs up automatically. So file, automatic backup, and you set that immediately to 1 minute. And that means that if your computer crashes, you're only going to lose the last 60 seconds of work that you've done. Everything else is automatically saving and backing up for you. Okay, so back to the audio waveform here. You can adjust the size of this by either choosing here or down here and just stretching it out a little bit there. But it still is quite, these sounds are very, very close to each other, and it is quite hard to kind of identify when each word is finishing. So if you right-click on that, you can zoom in and choose, say, the vertical zoom. What have I said on the thing? 300. Oh no, I said 200. So the vertical zoom is different. The way that this has been recorded means that it's really quite high and it's clipping a lot. So it's actually a little bit problematic having it on 300. I might just put it down to 200 so you can see as much as possible. And then we're going to zoom in this way so that we can see properly the ends of the words. So we'll put it down to, say, 300. Then we can really move in and have a look at where the audio is. And so, you know, that would be one word. I would play it, but we don't have sound. And that would probably be, see these pauses here, he's not speaking there. So you could say that's probably an utterance of some form. So then you can really kind of identify what is happening without actually listening to it. So, yeah. The next thing I'd like to show you on the screen, I guess, is the controls here, just to outline. I'll just drag this down a bit. Just to outline a couple of things. So as you can see here, we've got a volume control, which is the whole thing. And then we've got two different file things here. The first one is the WAV file, and it's at 100%. So that is the file that you imported first, and that's what Elan is talking to first, right? And then we've got the MPG file, which is the video file, and Elan automatically turns the audio on that right down. It could be that you've maybe had a Zoom recorder recording in WAV and a video recorder recording a video also with sound in there, and you want to use the good quality WAV file of your Zoom recorder, but you also have interfering audio from your video file. So Elan just turns that audio right down and then just references the WAV file. So you don't really have to check that, but I guess it's worth knowing. The other important thing here, which is unfortunate I can't show you, is the rate of speech. So if you're listening to someone who is speaking really fast in a language you're not 100% familiar with, you can slow the rate of speech really quite slow down so that you can really understand what they're saying, or you can speed it up if they're speaking incredibly slowly and you're getting bored. I'm not quite sure why I'd want to speed it up, but you can. Okay, so the next little thing to note is just the kind of controls under the bottom of the video here. They're pretty self-explanatory. Something great to know is that if you hover the mouse over them, you can see what the button does, but also what the shortcut is for that. So for example, control and spacebar on a PC is play or pause the media. If you want to know all of the shortcuts, go to View and Shortcuts, and it shows you every single possible shortcut you could ever imagine for every single view. So these are the general ones. Annotation mode, which is the mode we're in now, and there's lots. And then, say, segmentation mode, which is what we're about to go into. So you can actually print the shortcuts out, print them out from here and stick them on your wall if you want. It might make things easier. I don't ever use a mouse when I'm using Elan. I constantly just use keyboard shortcuts. So it just depends on your style of working, I guess. The other things that are great in this mode to have a look at, I guess you're wondering what these lines are on the side here. These are what I've referred to as tiers already. So each one of these lines is the space where you put the annotations, and they refer to different things. So this is the first speaker's text, like what he's saying. And just say we're going to translate what he's saying into another language, we can put that there. And then this is the text for speaker 2, and this provides us with the options to describe the gesture as well. So I'm aware that I've got only about a little bit of time left, so halfway through. So we might just get on to creating some segments, and then how to put the information in the segments. So effectively, a segment is like you've got a time-marked boundary to say, okay, at 1 minute and 13 seconds, this person starts speaking. I am going to write something about what this person's saying, and then at 1 minute 17 seconds, my writing will finish, and it only refers to that little chunk of time. And so that's what a segment is. It's like a little key box that kind of pokes into the time. I am so eloquent about describing this. Do you know what I mean by that? Does that kind of make sense? Okay. There's a couple of ways to do this. I'll show you the segmentation mode first. If we've got time, I'll show you my kind of keyboard shortcutty way that I do in annotation mode. Although it's not ideally best practice, I find it helps me. So segmentation mode is awesome because you have 3 different options of how to create these segments. You might have noticed that when I swapped between annotation mode and segmentation mode, these tier options changed here. And that's because we can only create segmentations on the top of the hierarchy, the ones that are in the tier structure that are at the top of the hierarchy that I talked about before. So there are dependent tiers that give a translation of the text that people talk about, and there's the text. And so in segmentation mode, we can only put segments on the text, and the translation the translation tier, which is a hierarchically lower tier and dependent on that text tier, it automatically gets a segment put in it. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. So, yeah. Is there no way we can make sound kind of even come out of this computer to do this? No? Okay, so let's just imagine that we can hear what he's saying, and I'll do my best. So what you do is maybe drag this down a bit, make sure you can see it. Your settings that you zoomed in and stuff on this audio pane will kind of be maintained throughout whichever view you're using. So you press play, and we're on 2 keystrokes per annotation. So you press enter to start the segment and enter to end the segment, and then you've got your little box, and then you move on to the next ones. So we'll press play, talking, and then enter, enter. So here I've tried, and it's been moving quite quickly, and I've tried to line this up with that. Obviously it hasn't worked perfectly, and there's a couple of ways you can edit that. So in the segmentation mode, you can drag this to go to the start of the utterance when it's green. You can also move the segment around by just clicking and dragging on it. And you can, when your mouse is hovering over it, you can just press delete and when it's green, and you can delete it if you've made a mistake there. So I'll just show you how, you know what might be good for the purpose of this is that because we can't hear the sound anyway, I'm just going to slow the rate down a bit. Okay. So now we'll have a look at one keystroke per annotation. And this is when you've got someone speaking really rapid speech and you don't really have those gaps between, so you want to have a segment for every single part of the of your audio. So then we click on that one, and the keystroke is always the return key or enter. And so it's talking, and then you go, okay, yep, there, and maybe there. Okay, so that makes these adjacent segments that we're going to put text into. And the other option is a fixed duration. So for whatever reason, you're wanting to have a fixed duration of little segments there, and you just move it through like that. There's also another one where you press it to mark the start and release it to do the end. So these all depend on the quality of the media or the kind of media that you're using, your personal kind of style of doing this kind of stuff. And the best way to do it is, now that you know there's 4 different options, is to go through and to see which one works best for you and for the kind of annotations you're planning to do. Okay. So a couple of things. You might have noticed as we press play here, we've got this red bar that moves through. You've also got a red bar here, up the top here, and that shows where you are in the recording, at what point. You can also see, I'm not quite sure if you can, I don't know how to zoom in on this part, but you see these little marks here. So these marks show the middle of the segment that you've put in. So if I click there, it goes to that one, or if I click at the start, it goes to the middle of the first segment I put through. And then you can see how this part has been selected here. So see how it's been kind of shaded in there in blue. For example, I could select just this much. When you've got something selected, you can see that it's been selected by this grey bar up here as well. Okay. So after you've done a bit of segmentation, you can then put writing into these segments. What I'm going to do is not use these random segments I've done, but actually just open up a file I pre-segmented. I'm not going to save that. So we'll go out of that and I'll show you how to open up an Elan file, and we'll just have a look at that. So there's 2 ways. You can go File and Open, and then we've got this EAF file, which I've already called Elan segmented. So you can just open it up there, and it will open up the next one. Or you can, there we go. So you can see the segments there, and there are 2 overlapping speakers in this interaction. So it's a guy, you've probably listened to it already, he's giving directions and someone else is going, yeah, yeah, and maybe asking questions. So that's one way. The other way is just to directly click on the EAF file from your file folder. Oh no, there we go. Okay, so if we do it there, we'll have a look here. We can see they're segmented, right? We've got EAF, we've got EAF 001, and we've got we've just got PFSX. So these last 2 are necessary for the file to run, but they're not necessary for you to click on. So if you're opening up an Elan file in this way, just double click on the EAF file. You don't need to worry about the rest. Yeah. No, so I've just created that. So the one I did, big Elan example, that was the one we created just before, and then this segmented one I just did beforehand to save me segmenting in class. So the next step would be to go and create annotations in these segments. So you can see we've got segments that go all the way along. There's little grey dashes all the way along. And if we go into transcription mode, then we can create transcriptions in these segments. And this is a great way to quickly run through stuff, especially if you're working with someone else, because it helps you play things really quickly and you can just move forward in a really nice, smooth workflow. Because it's geared towards that, you can change the font size really easily. So I work with old women who don't really have very good eyesight, and therefore I kind of make that bigger. Now, the number of columns that you choose depends on the different tiers that you have. Is that right? The different types, the different tiers that you're choosing to do. So we're just going to do one column here for the one speaker, and then you go, the type is the text. So we want to be writing down exactly what they say. And this is within the template, so the different types of tiers. It automatically adds another column, and that would give it for the translation, so the other potential thing in the hierarchy. But we'll just go down and do the text. So you'll press apply, and it comes up with this option for a kind of way of moving through the recording and looking at the different segments that you've set forward. This is going to be difficult without sound to show you how great it is. What we've got basically is you click on the top one, which is speaker 2, is saying something, and let's just bring the rate up. Because remember before I reduced the rate down, and that setting has been applied to every view. So we'll put the rate back up. You click on this, and it's playing the recording now, and then all you need to do, there we go, is type in what he says. So maybe he said that. If you want to then repeat what he said, you can press tab, and it just repeats it once. Or you can press loop mode, and then it will just play it again and again and again until you've really worked out, yep, that's what he said. So then all you need to do to go down to the next segment you've created is to press enter, and it moves on to the next one. And then he might say, yes, you're talking. And then again, so you press tab, it repeats what he's saying, and enter, moves on to the next segment that you've created, plays it for you, and you work out what to say and what he's saying and type it down. So let me just put some letters in here. Now, just say you've done all of your transcription. You can go back to annotation mode, and you can see here that we've got speaker 2 is saying, in this little bit, he's saying, so I'm talking, which he's not saying that, but anyway. And then this guy in this long thing is saying, yes, you are. And it just automatically goes in there. Just say maybe you've done a bunch of these and you go, you know what? Actually, he really didn't say, yes, you are, there. And I can't be bothered going back into transcription mode because I'm a bit lazy. You can actually just double-click here on that little square, and you'll jump straight back into that. And you can add whatever you want in there. Obviously, it's a long utterance. He's not just going to say 3 words. There are also really good keyboard shortcuts on how to jump around between these. It's probably easier that you work these out yourself. I don't want to kind of add complexity on complexity here. It is really simple to use. But I'll just say that you can move between the different tiers here. So we're on text speaker 1 because it's highlighted in red. We want to go back to text speaker 2 and add something in this column, in this tier, sorry. Then you can see it's highlighted there in red as well. And so you can double click there, or you can go control up and down to select those. Yeah. So once you've got your kind of transcribed text in these little segments, you can then export this as an interlinear text or in many different forms. So I'll show you here, there are many, export as. There are all of these options of where it can go, the potential kind of directions that you can send your transcription. And I guess it really depends on what you're planning to use it for and what you feel comfortable working with. Something that's really helpful, I guess, if you just want to kind of get it into text format and then put it somewhere else is the interlinear text. Ooh. And then with all of these export options, it gives you like a selection of different ways that you can export things and the kind of potential things that you include or not. So show all tiers, then you'll have a bunch of different things showing there. Or hide empty lines, probably a good idea seeing as we haven't actually typed in all the segments yet. And you can be quite particular with the things that you do in these options. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the start kind of introduction. Do you have any questions about the workflow or about Elan in general before we move to the next? Yeah.
You put down the side there in the smaller box, text bit 1, free translation, that little those
Yep.
plates there. On this example, I've got K-speech or SP.
Yes, so you would have opened this Elan example 3, right? I think. Oh no, not that.
I do have it.
No. You mean the one that was in the file with the WAV file and the audio file? Yeah, so that uses a different template. So you know how I said the template is what decides what the tiers are called and all of that? So the template has set that up to have different appearances. You can actually change the tier names and the template names and all of that kind of stuff yourself and change the relationships between them and things like that. I just don't really want to confuse people with that level of stuff at the moment, but I'm hoping maybe in a month or so to produce another video that does explain that. So, yeah, there's a link on the website to the rule videos. Just try to find... Yeah, it should be here, but for some reason I've deleted the one that you guys downloaded. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, I don't have it on my, yeah. No, so the template, you can create a template in Elan. You need to kind of determine what the tiers are and then what the relationships are between them, whether there's dependencies and what type of text you're putting in each tier. And then you can save the stuff that you've done as a new template. So there's sample templates that are in that zip file, which are basically kind of dictate how many lines there are here and what the relationship is between them. But if, say, you decide that you don't actually want to have gesture in here, you can go in, you can delete those, and you can save it as a new template. Yeah.
So that's where you put a line between your gloss and have a...
Yeah, absolutely. So in that folder with the link that we sent you that has the WAV file and the video file, there was also an EAF file in there, and that one has multiple. It's got interlinear. It's got morpheme by morpheme glosses in there. It's got multiple kind of descriptions of gesture. It would be a perfect time to put it up. I'm really sorry I don't have it. But yeah, so you can put anything you want in any of those tiers, and you can have an unlimited number of them as well. Although, you know, for your brain's capacity to kind of deal with all of the stuff that it can spit out, it might be good to limit it to.
Well, and also if you want to use this for anything else afterwards, you've got to think if you make it really complex, it's going to be very difficult to work with it later. So keeping it just for transcription and a free gloss is a really nice way to start. It might be all you need, and then you do other things with it later.
Yeah, because I mean, when you think of splitting a word up into morphemes when you're looking at an audio file, it's not necessarily the best tool to be doing that in, because how do you find those morpheme boundaries when it's like a fuzzy WAV file like that? It's going to be milliseconds. And so really fiddly work kind of making sure your little segments are sitting exactly where the potential morpheme boundaries are. But if you put it into another program like Flex, if Flex works for your language, then that can help you with all of that kind of morpheme by morpheme breakdown. All right, I think that's me done unless there's any other hands. So. You're all right? You know your computer better than me, probably.
Right, I'll just give you a quick introduction to simple Elan, just so you know what it is, and you can have a think about whether it's something you might want to use or not.
Oh, there it is. See how it's got heaps and heaps of, like, it's
okay.
everywhere. Yeah. On the left, there's heaps and heaps of different options for all the tiers, and they've gone down really, really deeply into the words and the structure. You can do that.
Well, but we recommend not.
Case speech and W speech, is that case speech and W speech mean, is that just their labelling?
Yeah. It's just something that makes sense for them, and I would not go down into this much detail in this program. It just becomes quite complicated. Yeah.
There's the hierarchy, just in case you're interested.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I might just show quickly is
Yes.
you can show the text up the top here for each or any participant. And if you're looking at a whole story, then you can look at the whole thing and then zoom in when you want to.
Yeah, so if you click on something like one of those utterances, it takes you to that section of the audio file.
Yeah. And then you can just play it there if you want to hear it. Okay. Sorry, I'm a bit lost here. Sorry. I've got myself in a knot here. You can see here I've got simple Elan and Elan. So simple Elan you can just load down from the Elan. So if you just search Google Elan, you'll get to the, I think we can probably do that just so in case, here's the page. So this is where you can get your Elan for Windows, for Mac, and down here is, you can see simple Elan. So you can just load that down quickly, and that's reasonably straightforward. And then you'll just get 2 Elans. And when you open up, with a bit of luck, I'll be able to get.
So there are 2 Elans, right? So Elan, the normal Elan that we just saw, and simple Elan is a version that we helped to get set up, which strips away a lot of the complexity. I mean, you saw just a sample of the complexity in what Bridie was showing. There's a lot in Elan. And simple Elan gets rid of all that, just lets you transcribe 1 line of text, so in 1 speaker. So if you've got multi-speaker or multilingual things that you want multiple tiers for, simple Elan isn't going to work for you. The idea of simple Elan was it's there for if you've got a speaker who's transcribing their own language and they don't want to get into the complexity of Elan, then simple Elan is made for that sort of scenario.
Is there any combination loss?
No, well, no. Jonathan will tell us. It's the same file. So simple Elan creates an EAF file, and then you just open that in Elan.
Okay, so I'm just going to open up a file, so it's a normal WAV file. Sorry, put it across. And I don't think I need to. Sorry. Right, yep. So what you've got here is a file. I've actually got stereo here, but that doesn't matter. And then you can just do some segmentation. And then just write it here. No, I've lost it. I'm sorry. I won't display my ignorance any further. I guess the important thing about simple Elan is to work out whether you really want to use it or not. For let's say the linguist, and I'm pretty sure everybody in this room, you'll be just using normal Elan. Simple Elan is something that was devised for if you're working particularly with L1 speakers who are transcribing material for you. Then it just strips away some of a lot of the complication, and they can just have a text line where they transcribe what they hear, and you can segment it, and then you've got something pretty straightforward that's useful. We've started to use it with one of our speakers, but we found some complexity there. We wanted to have 2 lines, one for the transcribed text, but this speaker, and you probably may well find it with your speakers, when they start transcribing something they've said, they say, oh, I didn't say it right there, because they might have used a foreign word, and they don't think that's very good, so they want to modify it. So we put in a modified line so they could correct, because they wanted to have it right, which is fair enough, that's the way they speak. But then we found that difficult in simple Elan. So I think probably all I'll just say at this stage is you need to think about whether it's going to be worthwhile or not. But I'm pretty sure it would be, if you've got quite a few people working who are transcribing for you. So I think it just depends at what stage you're at. But for the normal linguist, that I'm pretty sure you'll just work with Elan.
So one of the other use cases for this is if you've got an existing transcript. So if you type a transcript in Word or something like that, and then you want to timeline it, you can paste the transcript into that box, locate your cursor at the right place in the text, and when the media gets to that point, you hit return and it aligns the pre-existing transcript with the media. So that's quite useful if that's something that you've done. You know, some people do that. They've got some existing transcripts, so that's another use for Elan.
Another use could be a first pass transcription with the speaker, just writing down what they can say. Like if you're not really familiar with the language, you can just write down what they say, and you can get them to take that away and do it themselves at some stage. And then you can go and open up that file that they created in Elan and then go into more complexity.
So with regard to the question about information loss, that, as Nick said before, is kind of a one-way street. So you might start off in simple Elan, and then if you do want to add other information on other tiers and everything, you do that in the normal Elan, then open that same file in simple Elan. It's really geared towards a single line transcription.
And what do you think is about using the existing transcription? Can you do that in normal Elan?
Can you paste in a chunk of text in the way can you do the same thing, pasting in a chunk of text if you have something transcribed in a timeline in normal Elan?
No, it's quite tricky. That's one of the...
You have to probably set up the segmentation first and then paste it in line by line with each block that you set up.
Yeah. So if you do it in simple Elan,
Then you could just open that file in normal Elan. So that would, if you have it, then definitely start with simple Elan.
So the idea with this is that, you know, you should go to type and hit return when it gets to the right point in the media.
Yeah.
So
Okay, that's
play
right.
the media
That's right. Yeah, it's
and, you know, and hit return, or you can do the segmentation that we saw.
Yeah, that's right.
Just playing the file. You just play the file and then hit return. It should just do the segmentation. Then you can go back and do the looping.
And then enter.
Hit enter.
No.
So, for
I think you've
example,
got to have
when
some text.
Jonathan and I
Yeah.
shared
Yeah.
Files like this.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's
one
right.
of the participants that we work with, we first went through and just put in a whole lot of empty segmentations, so there were already chunks there that corresponded to an utterance, and then all he had to do was click on that and play it, and then type in what was there. So, because the actual setting up segmentations was a little trickier to
Yeah.
kind of demonstrate in the first instance. So we did that first, and then gave that sort of empty file slots to him, and it was easier for him to just go through.
Okay.
So maybe that's enough.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And we can talk more about this in the afternoon if you've got any questions.
So if we've got sound,
Yeah.
it might be easier to show you.
Move on to...
Thank you. Is that what you want?
She's going to do something, that's right. I don't really need it just yet.
All right.
So you saw that Elan file had all the complications. People had entered in morphemic glossing and spelling for Elan. Now, you can do that, but Elan is a great tool for doing that because it doesn't, you have to do it by hand. It doesn't look up anything. Well, the most recent version of it claims it can do a lookup of a lexicon and feed your transcript from that lexicon, but it's not really set up for that yet. Maybe in the next couple of versions we might see that. But Flex is the tool. You take your data first, you do your transcription in Elan, and then you export from Elan or import it into Flex. And Flex is the tool that links up your text to a lexicon, and it also has a parsing function, so it can strip words apart, look up the lexicon, and then create interlinear text, as you'll see in this presentation. So that's the ideal workflow is first do your transcription in Elan, and then work in Flex, as Rosie's going to tell us.
So this is the second handout that has been passed around. Does everyone have one? Is anyone missing one? Yeah. Oh, thanks, Brady. So pretty much what I've done in here is this, so there's a few basic points just at the beginning, and then it's pretty much sort of a set of steps for how to start a Flex database from scratch, and then we'll get onto some of the interlinearization options towards the end, and I'll pass back on to Jonathan for that. Flex is a piece of software that's developed by SIL. At the moment, it's only available on Windows and Linux. You can run it on a Mac if you have a Windows emulator. I haven't tried that. Apparently, it's a little bit slow, but Flex is a little bit slow anyway. Current version is 8.2.9. Pretty much it's designed primarily for the creation of a lexicon and then allowing you to do interlinear glossing of texts, drawing on information that's in that lexicon and using that to also automate some of the glossing and interlinearization to a certain extent. It's structured as a relational database. The data is in XML. It has various other functions that tie into those primary functions and some that are a little bit separate to it. And it's pretty much what people are using to do this sort of work at the moment. So people have previously used Toolbox, and that's no longer being developed. So more and more people are switching to Flex. There isn't really anything else that does quite the same thing at the moment. So even though it's not always ideal for the many and varied types of things that you might want to do, it pretty much is the main tool that people are using at the moment. And also just with relation to the sort of ideal workflow that we're talking about, where you might start out transcribing texts in Elan and then being able to bring those into Flex and then do your interlinear glossing and everything in Flex. The two programs weren't designed to talk to each other initially. There's sort of more convergence and there's more possibilities for making that work properly, but it is still a little bit tricky at this stage. So we'll get onto that in a little bit more detail. But that is what we're, hopefully aiming for as part of a kind of typical linguist workflow. There's a few links there to some other information and training. There's lots of demo movies. They're available from the help menu within Flex and also on the Flex website, which is in all the info that you've got, and other people stepping through this sort of stuff in much more detail. So do consult all of that. There is a lot of help there that'll get you started. So let's pretend we're going to start from scratch. We're working on a new language. We want to start recording some of the words. And we want to open up Flex and start saving some of those words in a database. So you want to click on the icon that you've downloaded for Flex. Just let that hopefully open. So when you open Flex for the first time, when you've downloaded it, you've got a few different options here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to create a new project, but I just want to point out on this menu here, down the bottom here, you can click the box that says, when I start Fieldworks Language Explorer, always open the last project automatically. I don't recommend you tick that box because it makes it harder to keep track of, if you say have different versions of some database that you're working on with different dates or whatever, it's going to get very confusing if you don't actually know what version you're opening. So I suggest you don't do that and always directly open the particular version of the database that you want to work on. So we're going to create a new project from scratch here. And you have to give it a name. And so the language that Jonathan and I have been working on for some time now is called Lapit. So I'm going to call this project Lapit. And so if you are following along on your own laptop, feel free to, this will just be a few simple steps as I talk through this today. And so you can follow along if you want. So we're going to call it Lapit. And then what you need to do before you can even open up the project and start entering any words is you need to set up the writing systems. So this is sort of all in the first chunk on your handout where it says setting up a lexicon from scratch. The writing systems are really important to consider and ideally to get right as early as you can. They're sort of a combination of language and script properties, if that makes sense. And you can have multiple writing systems set out there. So this is really good if you're working towards maybe wanting to have a trilingual dictionary or something like that, or you might have competing orthographies for a given language, or there's all sorts of possibilities there. So you can have multiple writing systems and you can actually build quite a lot of complexity in here to suit your needs. Pretty much the sort of basic way Flex approaches this is that it wants you to pick a vernacular writing system. So this is sort of, the language that you are working on or the language that is, the data is going to represent there. So there's a few built in here, and because this is Jonathan's computer, it's already got Lapit, so I'm going to pick Lapit from the list there. But what you can also do is you can go define new, and then it's a little bit clever. It will, if you've called your project Lapit, it will look up Lapit there as a possible writing system, and this is just pulling information from the ethnologue, so it's got a language code there and a language name that may or may not be appropriate, but it will give that to you as an option, but we don't need to because we've already got it. And then it wants you to pick an analysis language writing system. So this is whatever language you might be using for your translations or your definitions. In this case, we'll leave it at English, but it could be whatever you want, and you can also have multiple languages there as well. And so often when linguists are building these sorts of databases, we're going through a workflow where we have, information in the language. We're working on the head words in a dictionary, might be that, the kind of primary text might be in that, and then we're translating directly into English or some other analysis language. But you can also use this to then have a monolingual dictionary or something like that, or, both English and LaPitte in your dictionary for the definitions, that kind of thing. So we'll go OK there. Yeah. So you can click Add New, and then I'll show you in the menu in a moment, you can configure writing systems at any time from within the project. Yeah, so you can go, I'll open up Flex here now. So when I click OK there, it just comes up with this thing that says you also want to import all these anthropology categories. You're not likely to necessarily need those, but it doesn't hurt to have them in there. And we'll just give it a moment. There's a really good help file which has a lot of detailed information about the writing systems, and you can find that under help here and then resources. And so it's got technical notes on writing systems. I highly recommend you have a look over that when you're setting up your project. And you probably will find that you might do it one way to start with and then change early on as you start working with your data and seeing what works and depending on what your goals are. And if you want to change them in the course of working on your project, you go here to Tools, Configure, and then Set Up Writing Systems. And so it's got one here, we've picked one vernacular and one analysis, but you can add, you can modify. Within this, it has, you can set whether it's a right to left script, and if you're using a particular keyboard and all this sort of stuff that you might need to make it highly customizable. So, the font, any particular alphabetizations, that's actually a really important thing to think about, especially if you're working towards producing a dictionary or just for the purposes of sorting and filtering within the database. Maybe you've got some, characters that are not just the Roman alphabet or something like that. You can set all of that up in here and it'll all be part of the writing system and be drawn on across the thing. So we won't worry about that too much for now, but it's definitely an important thing to try and get right at the beginning. And yeah, feel free to keep interrupting with questions and things along the way. So you have a new project here. It's automatically saved. It usually goes by default to somewhere like C program files or C program data. Then there's a folder SIL, and then within that there's a folder called Fieldworks. So you might want to put it somewhere more useful. You can find out where it's saved to if you go to File, Project Management, and then it's Project Locations and Sharing, and see it tells me it's put it exactly where I just thought it would be put. You might want to change the location of that project, and that's where everything will go. And I'll talk a little bit more about locations for the project in a bit. So actually, I'll just open up a folder for an existing project. So this is for a database that I have. So the main project file is this one that's .fw data at the end. But what you actually want, if you're ever handballing the project on to someone else so they can look at your database or do some work on it or whatever, well, firstly, you can make a backup copy of it, which you can restore from to work on it. So that's one way to do it. But the main thing to note is that you need the whole folder, because within it, it has this main project file, but then it also has all these other files that have the configuration settings, any like audio files or photos or anything that's in there that's putting into the dictionary, all that kind of stuff is all bundled into one folder. So if you are going to be sharing it or passing it on, you need the whole folder. But this is the main file that you're opening your project from. So just a little bit of sort of orientation. So Flex has a couple of main tabs here down on the bottom left. At the moment, we're in the lexicon tab. That's where it'll automatically start you out. And then within this lexicon tab, there's a few separate options here on the top left. And lexicon edit is the one it will go to by default. And there's a few others that are related to sort of lexicon tasks, if that makes sense. And we'll touch on some of those in a bit. There's another one, texts and words. This is pretty much where you'll be putting your text, whether you're typing them in here directly or you're importing them from Elan or somewhere else. And doing your interlinearization, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. There's one called grammar, and so grammar has Firstly, it has lists of things like grammatical categories. You can put in all sorts of rules for how it performs the glossing, telling it that, okay, if you have a, this type of verb, then, these types of morphemes can attach to it. And, in sort of different types of rules, you can specify, classes of things, all that sort of stuff. This is all more useful the more you know about the language, so it is hard to get this stuff right early on if you're really just starting work on a language that you're very unfamiliar with. It also has a nifty little feature called Grammar Sketch, which is empty in here, but as you do interlinearization and glossing, it will start to try and give you some summary information about what kinds of structures are in the language. Don't really recommend using that as the basis of your PhD, but it is interesting to see what it kind of comes up with and generalises about. There's another one called Notebook, which I've never used, but it's pretty much a notebook. And there's another one called Lists, which is, again, lists of things that Flex draws on, pretty much anything that's not a grammatical category. So you might want to have, I don't know, you could set up, for example, the status of different entries. Is this word form confirmed or disproved or pending or tentative and stuff like that. So a lot of things that here you probably won't need to use, but also, lots of flexibility to do what you want to do with a particular project. But we're going to start out just in the lexicon tab. So this one, we're in lexicon edit. And what we want to do is we want to start entering in some new words. So the way to do that is you can click Insert Entry. You can also just click on this icon here directly. So we go Insert Entry. And it comes up with a few basic fields to start with, and there's more that you can add to this later on. What we're going to do first is put in a lexeme form. So this is the form of the word as it's produced in the language that we're doing research on or making a record for. So I'm going to put in a few examples from Lopit. The first one we'll put in is, I'm just going to spell this H-I-M-O, HIMO. It will automatically put the morpheme type as a stem, but there's a whole lot of options here that will become more and more useful. Again, the more you know about a language, and the morpheme types are necessary when you're doing your glossing and everything like that. So think about that. It doesn't matter at the moment. We're going to give it a gloss. This is the word for nose. The grammatical category, it has a couple of basic things in here. It's a noun. We're just going to pick noun and hit create. All right? So that gives us an entry there in the database. I'm going to do another one, so I'm just going to go for the shortcut here to create a new lexical entry and type another word, messy. And this one is the plural. This is noses, and it's also a noun. So we're going to give it that. So we've got 2 entries in our database now. And this might be how you start when you're just starting to put in some records. But maybe we want to add a little bit more detail here. So obviously I've translated one of these as nose and one of these as noses. Maybe, so in Lopit the number marking is very irregular, so we tend to enter in all of the plural and singular forms separately to one another. And in fact that's quite an asset of Flex, because then it can help you to sort of sort and filter and try and find if there are some patterns in there, and there are some patterns in there. So we want to be able to specify this isn't just a noun, this is a singular noun or a plural noun. So then we go to this grammar tab that I introduced before. There's a tab up the very top, category edit, and it has this category noun, which is what we selected from that basic menu at the beginning, but we want to add something else to that. So we can go to here, insert subcategory, and it's also just this shortcut here as well. So insert subcategory. Now it comes up with a list of categories here. It's very likely that you'll find as you start to put together a project for a language you're working on that some of these may be more useful than others. People often create a set of custom categories because, well, sometimes it's just more convenient or doesn't involve some of the same assumptions about how a language might or might not be structured. So I'm just going to go, okay, the category I need isn't here. I'm going to create a custom category. And it'll come up with a little asterisk entry here, which will fill in once I type in the name of the category. So we're going to call this noun plural. And notice here that it specifies the writing system. So every field that you're entering something into in Flex, it's going to have an abbreviation for the writing system. So this is telling me that it just wants information in the analysis language, and it's got their ENG for English. So we're going to say this is a plural noun, and then an abbreviation for it, which might be what's drawn on to show a dictionary formatted version of this, and that's fine. But we also want to create another sub-entry, so I'm going to do that in the same way. And we'll say noun singular. All right, and so they're both showing up as subcategories of noun here, and this is the way that you might want to start creating different types of categories that are relevant to your work. So if we go back to the lexicon now, we can change that. So firstly, what I'll show you is that, so it's got some of this basic information we put in here on the right. If you tick this box, show hidden fields, there's a whole lot more information that can be associated with each entry that you put in there. And unfortunately, I don't think you can yet actually customize this list, because there are things that are not part of the default view that I find I use all the time, but there's a lot of other stuff in there that I don't use. You can? Great, you can do that now. So you can set up the stuff that you actually are likely to use all the time and then just display that. So we have this one. I want to change the grammatical category here to noun singular. That comes up now because I've added it. We're going to call the other one the plural noun, so we added it. And okay, so a bit more sort of orientation around what gets shown up here. So Flex, when you type in a word in the language for the first time, it will automatically call that the lexeme form. So this is the field that's up top here. But perhaps, so the lexeme form is what is drawn on for the purposes of glossing and so on. But perhaps you want it to show up a little bit differently in the dictionary. So by default, the dictionary display, which very conveniently you can see is up the top here as well. It gives you a preview of what it might look like in the dictionary. But if we said actually for the dictionary form, you know, maybe we for some reason want to spell it like that, then that's what we'll display. So it gives you an option to have what's under the hood and then what is actually being displayed for sort of you know, print or something like that. We'll leave that for now. But if you don't have anything in there, it'll just automatically show the lexeme form. The definition. So here we've put in just a gloss to begin with. Now the definition field in the dictionary will automatically use whatever is in the gloss field unless you've got something longer. So I'm just going to go back to the singular here. So maybe for the definition, I want to have something a little bit more details. I want to say something like protrusion on the face for drawing in air. And so now you can see in the preview at the top here, that's what's showing up. So it's still got the gloss, and that's still what would be used when we're doing the interlinearization. But separately, it has a more detailed definition that's shown up for dictionary purposes. Okay, so there's also a pronunciation field here. And so this might be where you store, for example, a phonetic transcription of the word. And so maybe it's worth saying at this point that when I started using Flex, so my main interest is phonetics and phonology, and so I wanted to set up Flex as a lexical database so I could start recording words in the language and then being able to find out information about the types of tone patterns or the syllable structure of those, be able to sort and filter so I can select certain types of things to develop experimental materials to record with groups of speakers, that kind of thing. So the pronunciation field is one I use a lot. I won't worry too much about tone for the moment, but for example, that orthographic H actually corresponds to a velar fricative, so maybe I want to type in something like that, and then you can see it comes up in phonetic brackets there as well. And so notice that when I start typing in the pronunciation field, it's actually popped up with a couple of other fields underneath. They didn't show up before I had something in there. So the way Flex is structured is it has all of these different fields that can be filled out that relate to an item, but some of them are bundled together. And not always in intuitive ways, but sometimes in intuitive ways. And this is important to know because especially if you're going to be importing data from some other source, say you have a toolbox dictionary or something, you kind of need to have an idea of how Flex is treating things. And it also has relevance for how things are formatted when you are producing a dictionary. So, for example, the order that you might want to display things in is in some ways bound by how they're bundled together in Flex's internal structure. So I put in a pronunciation there, and then, and actually another useful feature of this is that I can then, so it has a field for CV pattern and tone, but there are options here in the lexicon edit, the other options in the lexicon tab here, where it has bulk edit entries. So I could, using various search functions or regular expressions, I could set up a way of automatically taking any tone diacritics that are in my pronunciation and then filling in this tone field with, you know, HL for high-low, if it just finds any vowel that has a diacritic for a high tone and that sort of thing. Or the CV pattern of words, I could say, okay, you know, copy from this field, the pronunciation field, into the CV pattern field, everything that's in there, but then also replace every one of these things, which is a consonant, with a C, and every one of these things, which is a vowel, with a V, and then that'll give me the CV pattern. So it gives you a lot of abilities to work with the data in ways that don't involve you manually typing everything from scratch if you've done it in the first instance in one field. The location field is one that we've used to enter dialect information. So Flex is sort of geared towards you maybe working on some dialect of a language, and then if you find other words that are spoken by people who speak other dialects of the language, you have to generally enter those as variants of this word or a variant of that word. We didn't really want to do that, or I didn't really want to do that when I first set up this database, to pick one dialect as primary and then have everything else as kind of derivative as that. So what I've done is use the location field to specify dialect information without having to pick one as the main one, although the way these things work, you know, 95% of the data in there is from one dialect. And so Flex has, with the types of fields that Flex has, some of them you can just type in any old thing. Some of them are based on lists. So they're based on controlled lists where you have to pick from a set of items. And those are the only things that can go in that field. So the location field is one of those. So if I want to enter in a location, I can't just type the dialect there. I have to actually set it up as an item in a list, which I can then select. So this is just at the bottom of your second page here, just if you're keeping up. So actually it's at the top of your third page. So I've clicked in that field, and you see this little box comes up on the right-hand side with a dot, dot, dot in there. If I click on that, it comes up with a list, but it's empty. And I want to say, okay, I need to add something here. I need to edit the locations list. And so notice that this has then switched us to this lists tab here, which is where these types of information are stored in Flex. And so it's automatically taken me to this locations one on the side here. And so I want to add a new one. So I want to go to insert location. And so the dialect that we've worked on a lot is called Doric, so I'm going to write Doric there. And notice that for this field, it's giving us both writing systems, so that's the abbreviation for Lapit as the writing system, and for English, very conveniently, we're spelling these the same way anyway. And then we can give it an abbreviation, which might be what's shown up in the dictionary if you choose it to. So we've got that one. I'm going to add another dialect as well. Okay, so we've got two in the list there. So now if I'm going to go back to my lexicon tab, and it just automatically saves this as you put it in. So Flex is constantly saving in the background, which is handy. So now if I go back to this pronunciation tab and I click on this location box, it's got the two dialects that I put in there, so I can specify this is the pronunciation in the Doric dialect. But it has to be in that list already. Okay, a couple of other key fields. One of these is the reversal entries here. So this is what might go into what sometimes people call a finder list. So if you then want to have a list in the back of your dictionary that has all of your English glosses or something, whatever you think people might be using to look up the word in the language of interest. And so, you know, an obvious reversal would be nose, if we're looking it up in English. But you can have as many as you want. So we could also write schnoz or snout. We can have those various options. Because we have both the singular and plural forms that we enter in separately, we try and match the reversals for the singular and plural. So for the plural form here, I'm not going to put in noses, schnozzes, snouts. I'm going to put in the same thing, and I'll show you why in a second. Okay, so I'm in the lexicon again, and then I can show up, reversal indexes here. And so if I was looking this up in the back, I can see that it's got nose, and then yes, indeed, it's got both my singular and my plural there. But also if I was looking it up under schnoz instead, I would find those, and also snout, because I put all. So you can have as many as you want. You know, it doesn't hurt whatever you think people might be using to look it up, which is really nifty. But you don't have to do that manually. Again, with these, this bulk edit tab on the side here, you could set up a way of saying, okay, I automatically want to copy everything that's in my gloss field over to the reversal indexes field. And then you might find you might need to manually edit some of those or add extras and that sort of thing. But that's a really good way to start. If you already have a simple gloss, just copy it all in there, and then you can start working with that. And it's very easy to do it in a way that, you know, you can do this regularly. So maybe you do it, you have 50 entries in there, and then you copy across all the glosses and you get your reversals. And then a few weeks later, you've got another 50 entries. You can do that in the same way, and you can say, but if the field is already full, just leave it. So it'll only fill in the ones that are empty in your reversal field. So, but if you are doing stuff with this bulk edit function, I highly, highly, highly recommend you make a backup copy first. And you should try and do this regularly anyway, just because it is very powerful, but that doesn't mean you can really muck up your database if you do the wrong thing. So you do want to be able to roll back. So the way you would do that is you go to File, Project Management, and then back up this project. And then what it does, it'll make a single bundled file that has that FW data file in it, but also all that configuration information. I showed you it was all in one folder. It'll give you one file that's .fw backup. I don't think there's one. Oh, there is. So it'll give you a file that's got the same project name. This full project here was called LPX instead of LPIT, and .fw backup, and that would be your backup. And it automatically puts them again in some, you know, Fieldworks specific folder, but you can put it wherever you need to, and it'll put the date in it. So I recommend doing that. Okay, just a couple of other key fields in here. So back to the lexicon tab, and then lexicon edit up the top. So the other ones that I find useful, there's a field bibliography. So we put in the recording identifier here, so we know where the word came from, and a time code if we can. I mean, sometimes there are things in there that have come up 50 times, and so you sort of arbitrarily pick one that's a reference, but then when you're going through it, you'll know where it's come from. But it might also be useful because sometimes people might be working with different types of materials. So I did some work on someone's database that was using some historical written records, but then there are also some more recent audio recordings of people, sometimes for the same word, sometimes there wasn't any overlap between this. So people wanted to be able to distinguish, you know, what is the written source of this, and then also what was the spoken source of this. Sometimes there was both a written and a spoken source, and so you can also use, there's another field in here, source, which you might set up different individual speakers, for example, and have that information in there. So again, it depends on what the purpose is, what sort of data you're working with, you know, what you want built in there, but as much information as possible is good. And that's pretty much the main sort of primary fields that I tend to use. But what you want to do is also be able to see whatever the most relevant information is when you're working with it. So an important thing is to be able to go to Tools, Configure Columns here. And this allows you to choose what's showing up. So you can see here it's got head word, lexeme form, glosses, grammatical info. That's what's here, head word, lexeme form, glosses, grammatical info. But maybe I also want to be able to show up, what else did we put in here? Well, there was the pronunciation field.
Location.
Sorry?
Location.
Location, yeah. So we'll put in both the pronunciation and then locations. And so if we show that up, then because we put that in for one of these entries, it's got that there as well. So you can just put as much or as little in there as you want. Okay, so that's kind of just the basics to getting started. I've got more to go through here, but does anyone have any questions about that so far? Yeah, I think it probably is. It's all stored. Oh, sorry, you mean like within the screen that you're working? So it's all stored as XML. The spaces, yeah, it probably is. Yeah.
No,
No?
it's just a simple, if you have like in your definition, there is, you'll just consider it as a single string.
Yeah.
In the reversal, you use a semicolon to break the string.
Yeah, it'll do that automatically for the reversal. But I think it does, if you put spaces in a definition or in an example sentence or something like that, it will keep those there, yeah. But, yeah. Yeah. Sorry? So it's all sort of hierarchically structured and with some different fields that are bundled together, and then some of them are permitted to have multiple entries and some are not, and so it sort of depends on what field it is as to how it's separating the information in it. But
I've said this already, but is there the opportunity to record different source orthographies for the same item?
So yes, absolutely. So you'd have to set it up first as a separate writing system, and then for any field, so say that I wanted to have maybe my definitions, I wanted to, or the gloss, whichever one, I wanted to be able to have it in a couple of different orthographies. All I need to do is click on the arrow there and go to writing systems and then configure, and then I can pick from my list of other writing systems in there. So, but you have to already have it set up as a writing system that the project uses, and then you can have as many as you want. Yeah. Any other questions? Keep going a little bit, just jump in whenever. So something you might want to do is, instead of manually typing in each word that you come up with, you might already have some data that you want to import, maybe in a toolbox format or some other format. So there are various possibilities for doing that. So Flex can import the standard format lexicon. So you go to File and Import. In the materials that were sent around, and there's a link on here as well, there's just a tiny little set of sample data that if you want to try this, you can use. So I'm going to show you that now. Actually, I'll show you what the file is first. So the one that you would have downloaded would be this one. That would be the title of it. And just so that you know what it is, I'll just open it. Yes, go, let me do it. Whoops. Anyway, so that's what it looks like, that file, which is just what a toolbox lexicon file looks like. But I actually made it just by making a little spreadsheet which had those backslash codes as the column headings, like that, and then converted that into that DB format using sheet swiper. So again, this might maybe something else. People might just have a word list in a spreadsheet or something like that, but you can also turn that into a format that you can easily import if it's very simple. So we'll go import standard format lexicon, and again, it's giving you this backup recommendation, which is always a good idea before you make any major changes. I'm just going to go next. So got to look for the database file, so it's that .db one that I showed you. And it will automatically create an import settings file, which will become obvious what that's for once we get to the next screen. But you have to pretty much tell Flex how things are mapping. So some stuff will line up neatly because under the hood it's using some of the same backslash codes. Some stuff won't so much, or you might want to map it in a particular way that suits you better. So, but you do this once, and then if it works well for your project, you can keep using this same settings file every time you do an import. So it's just creating that automatically. Then I go next. It wants me to give the information about the writing systems. It's got already English, and it's already got the pit in there, so we're just going to leave it at that. Okay, so this has actually already lined up very neatly, probably because I've done this before on this laptop maybe, I'm not sure. So it's telling me that this is the marker that's in the file there, and this is the fieldwork field that it's going to map to. So this is all fine. The lexeme form is going to be the lexeme form with the pronunciation there, pronunciation location. That is all correct. If you needed to modify anything, if you want to say, well, actually the lexeme form needs to go to the citation form or something, you'd click modify, and then you would have to tell it very specifically what it's going to map to instead. So this is reasonably straightforward if you have a very simple database that you're importing. You've just used a few key fields. But if you have a very sophisticated or perhaps very inconsistently organised toolbox database, this is going to be a lot trickier. So if you do have one of those, it's a really good idea to clean it up as much as possible using regular expressions. So if you need to find mistakes, or if you need to say, well, actually, I've used this custom / code, but I need to rename it all as this, do what you can to clean up the raw text file before you import it into this, because it will make your life a lot easier and it will make the mapping work much better. But that all looks fine for now, so I'm just going to go next. This is an important screen here. So basically what this is telling me is that any time it has, if it has more than one tick in one of these chunks, so again this relates to how Flex bundles different fields together. So if it had 2 ticks in here, it would split them off as 2 separate entries within the database. So what you really want is you just want there to be 1 tick within each of these boxes. It'll probably be more obvious what ramifications this might have if you're working with your own data. But if I had a separate gloss and then I tick definition as well, it's going to split them into 2 separate entries, and I don't want that. So 1 tick within each bundle of fields here. And next, that's all fine. So what it wants you to do first is generate a report for how well or otherwise it's going to work. So again, this is just a very small set of sample data, so it does it very quickly and there aren't any issues. If you have a very large database, this will take some time to process and probably have a whole bunch of errors, but it'll at least tell you what those are. It'll say, okay, I didn't know what this was, so I've just, imported it as this, or that sort of thing. But these are all fine. It tells me how many occurrences there are of each / code, that kind of thing. So go next. I don't want to display the final report because it'll be the same. We'll go finish. And then it's got all this data that I already prepared. So you can get it all in one hit. And what else? So you will want to think about, again, earlier in the piece, how you might want different entries to relate to each other. So people might approach this in different ways, but for example, in this little set of data that I put together, I put in a few different singular and plural forms, and so I might want to be able to tell Flex that these are related, that this is a plural of this. And so you can use some of these fields which are complex forms, and you might want to say, this is a plural form of this. And again, this is an area where there's a lot of customization involved. It depends what you want to do. Or maybe for this one here, which I can see I've actually spelt wrong, I might want to say, so this one's from a different dialect, see, it already has a different dialect specified there. I might want to say this is the Ngaburi pronunciation of this Doric word here, and just have a link between those, which will go both ways. So it's saying this is the Ngaburi form of this Doric word, and if I look at the other one, this is the Doric form of this word. And so you can use the, we use the lexical relations field for that, and we again set up a bunch of custom ones specifying the dialects. So this is probably something to play around with a bit yourselves and see what works. Any questions on that? Okay. So I'll just jump across to my other database and show you a little bit about searching, sorting, filtering. And I'll stop in just a couple of minutes so we can get on to the next thing. So you can have multiple projects open at once, which is handy. It doesn't cause a problem. It just takes a minute to open. So this is just a version from a while ago of the LePit database that Jonathan and I have been working on. Oops. Okay, so it's got a few of the different columns that I've already set up there to display, and because this is all stored in the configuration settings that are bundled together, it'll open up the same way every time as long as I haven't changed those. And maybe I am thinking, okay, I want to just alphabetize everything. So you can just click on the head word, sort it by A to Z. This will use information that you set up in the writing system on how to alphabetize things, if you want to sort and filter. Maybe I want to, in the definition field, I want to really try and find out a bit more about all these different things that are just entered in as spinach species and other spinach species, and see if I can get a bit more information about what those are. Or maybe what I want to do is, I'm just going to copy this. Sorry. Just want to copy this glottal stop character here. So maybe what I want to find out is, okay, so you just go to filter for. Maybe I want to put this, which word that ends with a glottal stop. So at the end. Notice you can put in match for regular expressions here. If you do that, you can put in more sophisticated searches and things. So which of these ends in a glottal stop, and because we've also put in some other fields for the number marking, and also have this one chooses from a list, and also have a marked singular, and hopefully, yep, there's nothing there. That's good, because this is an interesting thing in this language. It doesn't really matter to you, but so I want to see, which of this thing, according to this thing, shows up. So all sorts of different possibilities there. What else? And these are also very useful when you're doing your bulk editing. So if you just want to edit only the entries that are about different spinach species, and you only want to change all of those from some type of noun to some other type of noun or something like that, that's where you can really get a lot of power from it. Okay, so I've already showed you how to back up projects. That was in a file, project management, back up this project. If you were then opening one that someone else had given you, or you needed to go to an early one, it's just restore a project. And you can also do this from that initial menu when you open Fieldworks to begin with. You can restore a project from there as well. Is that a question? No? And there are various export possibilities, which are actually quite straightforward. You just print sort of a sample dictionary so that you can actually just show people something that you're working on. So that would be file, export, and a bunch of different stuff comes up. There's some plugins that you need for some of them, which is specified here on the handout, but pretty much what it can look like is so here's an example of an export we did a while back, just without playing around with the formatting and all, is sort of what it'll automatically do, which is just nice to be able to show people, here's what things are starting to look like. And, again, it's drawing on the alphabetization that you've built into the writing systems and all that sort of thing. Heaps of customizability about how things are formatted here, what shows up, what doesn't show up, the fonts, all that kind of thing. Yep. Don't know how to get out of it now. Well, actually, I did. It didn't work.
All right, it's really bad.
No, thanks. Probably could have worked it out. And in fact, Jonathan, if you want to stay here, I'll hand over to you, because that's pretty much where I am. Any other questions on that? No? So Jonathan's going to chat to you a little bit about what you might do to look at text. If you want, this one has already got that Ikuda one.
Yeah, I might do the one that I've got. Oh, no, it's the same one, isn't it? Okay. We were in the lexicon, and just going to take you through to texts and words. And what you can do, as we've mentioned, is go from Elan and import into Flex. And if you're doing this, it means you can concentrate in Elan on just transcribing. In fact, that's all you need to do. Or you can transcribe and have a free translation. And that's all you need to do. Don't do any glossing in Elan. Just import from Elan into Flex. Now, I've done it once and it took about 3 hours. And you've got to have everything set up, and there are some. There's a guideline on the internet from someone who's posted it there in a sort of users group, and there's like 30 pages of instructions. So it is complicated, but if that's what you're doing, it would be extremely powerful. And you have to really work out whether Flex is the best place to do your glossing. And it's one of those sort of things that at some stage on the path, if you're documenting a language, it's probably going to be a good thing. When you start, you obviously can't do much glossing because you don't know what to gloss. You know, for example, you don't really know whether you've got imperfective or perfective. You don't know whether you've got nominative or accusative, whether they're marked with suffixes or tone or separate particles. So it's very hard to gloss automatically when you don't know how the language is structured. But if you do know, then you can gloss automatically, and it's very powerful. So what I'll just do briefly is just give you an example of, we'll just assume it's all imported. Okay. And then see how it, so this has just been, in fact, this one's just been loaded through, in fact, from a Word file. And so it's come in like this on the baseline. Let's see what, and just got some basic information on where it came from. And then glossing, and then the analysis is where it's all done through each word comes through. Now, that sort of happens because it'll do stuff automatically, and if it can't do it, it won't do anything. So what I'll do is show you what you can do where you see those asterisks where it's incomplete. So if I want to split that, because I can recognise that H to begin with is actually a sequential marker. So that's split it out and it's identified it. And then I'll put another morpheme break there, and that's picked that up as a third person plural. And it's picked up the word as the remaining letters, the remaining morpheme Joe, as the word to say. So that will then gloss that. Now, of course, another way of looking at that is hojo just means and or and then. It's a grammaticalized version of and it was said. So, you know, you can also get rid of it. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm very crude. Sorry? Yeah, that's right, yeah. So, what I could have is just then. So it just becomes then. Then the squirrel and the elephant. And I can do the same here. And once again, I get that So that's just a way of expressing and cloud. So you just go through and you correct it, and it'll do quite a lot automatically. You'll come across one that's not there, and then you can just create a new entry. That'll be a... Oh, so how do we get it done? I don't know how to save it now. Sorry? Oh, create. Oh, sorry, I can't see it there. How come that one? Oh, I see. Sorry. I'm not used to working on a small screen. So you can then add to your dictionary as you go along, which is pretty handy. In fact, that's Don as red, become red is the infinitive. It's right. So that basically. So I guess what I'm saying is it does a lot of stuff automatically. If it doesn't quite know something, then it's a great opportunity to add something in to improve your lexicon and also to to effectively enter your grammar in, so with your particles and your prefixes and all those kind of things. And as you can see down here, you've got quite a bit of grammar we can. No, that was wrong. Anyway. So it's pretty useful. The thing is, it's very rigorous. So if you're pretty comfortable with the state of your knowledge of your grammar, you can go through and do it a lot. One of the things you'll see here is there's no tone, and this is a language with grammatical tone as well as lexical tone. The language also has vowel quality differences based on ATR, which is sort of like a tense and lax vowel quality. So they're written differently. They're not incorporated in this at the moment. So when you've got all those sort of things, and there's some reasonably complex vowel harmony things, you have to know the language completely before you can do it. So it's sort of like, well, that's hard. So I guess I'm at the stage with this language where I actually do my glossing in Elan. No, sorry, I do my transcribing in Elan, and then I just download that, export it to a text file and do it in Word, and then do my glossing in Word, because I change my glosses every 3 months anyway when I rediscover something and have to change it. So, but if you're working in a language, where other people have worked on and the grammar's solid, or you worked on a language which, maybe it's, isolating language where you can sort of narrow stuff down as you go, and you don't have to worry. You can find it very useful. So it's something you need to work out how much you want to do in each one. But certainly the lexicon is really very valuable, because when I'm glossing or translating, I keep diving back to the dictionary just to check I've got it right. So very powerful, but you need to think about it's a lot of work to go from Elan into Flex. But I don't know, has anyone ever done that on a regular basis of importing into? Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Yeah, that's cool. Anyway, I think that's really all I wanted to say. Just to sort of say that this is very powerful. If you've got a good understanding of the grammar of the language, then it does gloss very quickly, and you've just got to go through and you can pick pick up a text pretty quickly, and that will then update your dictionary, so it becomes sort of iterative and quite powerful in closing in and improving your dictionary. So it's got a lot to recommend it, but you just need to work out whether it's the right thing for your language at the particular stage that you're at. Any questions?
One thing I might add on the end of that is that one of the good things is that it keeps you very organised. If you do at some point decide that actually, this word tome that I've lost is elephant, I got that wrong, it's actually rhinoceros, and you fix that in your lexicon.
Yeah.
Or you can also do that from within the text here. That will roll that out across every instance of that. So that's a really good thing, but it also means that once you make a decision, it does apply to every instance of that.
Flex is really useful an initial project, but doing the gloss analysis, not the analysis tab.
Right.
So you can just gloss just the word level. So the analysis is kind of morphine level.
Yeah, yeah.
Gloss, you can just work, and you can tell Flex to put it into your dictionary, and then as you develop an understanding of the grammar and the morphology, you can change the dictionary entry, and it will populate it back out. Yes.
We did that in an earlier stage of this project. We were sort of entering in various things like in terms of verbs, just as whole forms, and some guess at how that might be glossed. And then as you start to learn about the structure, you can pull those apart as separate morphemes. But it is a little tedious to enter it in. We found that we have maybe you have a dozen or more entries just for one verb, and so you sort of have to make a call about how to coordinate all that. But it does help.
Yeah, and I guess I've made the change from doing everything in normal orthography script. I've gone back to IPA for everything, so then I've got to work out how to do it. So it's can get complex.
Okay, we'll have to wrap it up
Yeah.
there, and we can take up any questions you've got thinking about during lunchtime in room 407 in the Melbourne building at 1 o'clock.
Have an indication of who's going to come to the afternoon? Or who's not going to come? Yeah, correct. That's good. Okay, thank you. And also can I have my USBs back?
Does everyone know where the Babel building is? Here, or we're going to be heading back that way, so you can follow us if you want to find where it is.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thanks for letting us use your laptop.
I'm not used to using it. I'm used to using my computer at uni. So I lost everything.
Is that yours? I don't think it's Bridie's, but it could be. She had 3. I'll see.
No, I didn't actually bring it, but it might be. Now, where's my... Well, I learned quite a bit from Bridie's presentation. A few little things that I hadn't... like that automatic save. God, I should have used that. Remember when I had a lot of problems when it just disappeared on me?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the versions about
That was one of the weird
4.7 or something. It would just freeze.
Elan.
Yeah.
It's like you always
But since 4.9.3 or 4, it hasn't frozen at all. So it's been great.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. It's totally overwhelming. So was just because one must multitask all the time, as you know.
And there's no class.
So you are actually to the 31st of January 2014. Yes, which is going to come around much quicker than we